Hello, everyone. I'm Duru Ahanatu, the sole proprietor of Ahan Analytics, a data analytics consulting company. And today I'm going to take you through a concept that's been in the work for quite a few years. I've been in analytics, incredibly enough, since the 1990s. I started leading analytics teams in the 2010s. And this concept, how to lead and organize the insight supply chain, I started up when I built out a 20-person analytics team with Yahoo back in, again, the middle of the 2010s. And since then, I've refined it. The times keep changing, the technologies keep changing. And I thought it was about time that I plant a flag and put this out there in presentation form. So thank you for visiting, and let's get started. So again, the title is How to Lead and Organize the Insights Supply Chain. Now, the executive summary covers several areas, and what I like to put out a claim to is that you use knowledge management to create value from the insight supply chain. So I did my PhD in knowledge management back in the 90s, and at every stop along the way, I have seen how knowledge management is an important centralizing concept for the way that we manage the insight supply chain. So data is a tool for managing knowledge in service of value creation. We specialize knowledge management to create value from a strategic core competence in data. You should consider centralizing knowledge management to maximize data leverage and create consistent value from standards of data excellence, and tune the amount of specialization and centralization in your organization according to the degree of dependence across business units. You use knowledge management as a binding organizational imperative. So that was a mouthful. I'm going to step through each of these concepts one by one, but just keep in mind that, again, knowledge management is central to the way that we organize the insight supply chain. And the insight supply chain starts with data and ends with insight that brings value to the business. And along the way, we have to consider, how do we organize the people? There are many different options, many different ways of organizing the people who are involved in analytics with the types of teams and size of teams that we want to create. So let's continue. So this is the agenda. There's 4 parts to this presentation. I'm going to do a quick primer on what I mean by knowledge management by taking us all the way back to early times. Don't worry, it's going to be very quick. I'll discuss the insight supply chain, the way that I think of it, the organizing principles for data-driven organizations. As I mentioned earlier, you have to consider how you want to organize your teams and individuals. And then we'll conclude with talking about the strategic choices, the very specific strategic choices that organizations must make when they are organizing their insights supply chain. All right, so Frederick Winslow Taylor is popular for time studies in manufacturing, but he's often been vilified for trying to turn people into robotic participants in manufacturing. Now, I claim that when it comes to knowledge management, he's misunderstood. And I think of Taylor as really ushering in this modern era of knowledge management in the workplace. So when I read Taylor way back when, I noticed that he, despite all the other stuff that was going on with the way that he looked at manufacturing, at the core, he really wanted to nurture, not eliminate knowledge in the workplace. And I honed in on this one specific quote, or I selected this quote. The most important object of both the workman and the management should be the training and development of each individual in the establishment, so that he can do, at his fastest pace and with the maximum efficiency, the highest class of work for which his natural abilities fit him. Now, again, remember, this is in 1911 when you're looking at the way that the language is structured. But when I saw this quote, what I saw is, wow, this Taylor really noticed how important knowledge is in successful manufacturing, and how knowledge gets nurtured and improved when management is specifically looking out for the training and development of those workers so that they can reach their highest potential. Now, this is a win-win. Now, depending upon your perspective on labor and capital, you can look at this positively or negatively. I'm going to cut it right down the middle and say that this is a win-win. The company wins because it's working at its best, highest capacity, and individuals win because they are developing themselves to the highest of their abilities. And in the ideal case, they can also take those skills and move on to other workplaces and continue to develop as they go to other like-minded enterprises. So anyway, this is my starting point, that no matter where you stand on labor versus capital and all that stuff, at the end of the day, we're all about improving knowledge management in the workplace. And that helps the workers and it helps the enterprises that they work for. So now let's completely fast forward to today, 112 years as the case may be right now. And now I see Taylor actually lives on, whether we want to admit it or not, in this digital age with what I'm calling the insight supply chain. So now we have computers, we have data, and now, of course, artificial intelligence, which facilitate the natural capabilities that Taylor talked about, the same way that mechanical machines assisted bone and muscle in the industrial age. And of course, manufacturing continues today, so the machines are still helping us in that sense. So just as a physical supply chain of goods and services support an efficient means of production, now an insight supply chain enables low friction channels for transforming data into decisions and business value. So that's the supply chain. And along each part of the supply chain, we want to make sure that we are nurturing knowledge management at each step along the way. So that's my quick primer on early knowledge management. Let's dive into the insights supply chain. So this is a kind of what I call a stylized view. And I understand that there are all sorts of different types of roles now in the modern data analytics organization or team or group. But let's just start with this because these three components really give me a good way of talking about the concepts that I want to introduce you to and to teach you. So the insight supply chain basically sources data, transforms it into insights, and those insights are what deliver business decisions or support business decisions and deliver value. So we go from data engineering to data analytics to insights analytics. Now, again, these links in the insight supply chain, they're functional labels, they're not organizational titles per se. And again, I recognize that there's all sorts of other ways that we've now found to label and overlap the capabilities. But let's step into each one of these very quickly. So data engineers nurture and leverage the data infrastructure. They code, query, generate data sets. They monitor and maintain infrastructure. They remain current with changing data technologies. That's especially important these days with things moving so fast with data technologies, well, technology in general. And they advocate for best practices for leveraging data. So in other words, they are key in making sure that the data infrastructure and the databases and our data sources are as healthy as can be. Now, the data analysts will explore data and make discoveries. So they also query, but now they take things one step further, which is to organize and structure data according to some objective from their stakeholders. They will transform data, they will predict, they'll develop models, and they'll identify data relationships. So now we're going from just the raw sources of data to now we have some sort of objective where it requires some amount of organization, some analysis, and some transformation. And then finally, we have the insights analyst. Now, let me take a quick second to describe an insights analyst and what's different from a data analyst. So an insights analyst is specifically looking at the business value, looking at the objectives of the business, and looking to see how data and analytics can then support business and answer specific business questions. So these folks are doing things like they're imagining and they're creating, they're packaging, presenting, and advocating for their findings. They are implementing and driving adoption of the ideas or the analysis, and they're evangelizing. So even after they've gotten some key stakeholders to accept their conclusions, they still have to go throughout the organization and evangelize. So the difference, again, between the data analyst and the insights analyst is that their action point, their lever is directly with the business stakeholders. All right. So now that I've gone through this simplified look at how the insight supply chain works, let me acknowledge a little bit of the richness, of course, that surrounds these three concepts. So the insight supply chain runs on specific roles, even though certain responsibilities are, of course, distributed across people or teams. So data engineering, nurture and leverage the data infrastructure. Of course, we have systems engineers, we have IT infrastructure that's also as an important part of our data architecture. Data analytics, that's where we explore and make discoveries. Now, of course, today we know that data scientists are also involved in doing this work. And we have analytics engineers who cross between data engineering and data analytics. And then finally, the insights analytics, where we support or where they support decisions with data-driven narratives that demonstrate value. And data scientists can overlap from data analytics and insights analytics. So at the end of the day, yes, there are all these different labels, different roles, and titles, but I really want to hone in on these three key concepts, no matter how you want to reshuffle the labels: data engineering, data analytics, and insights analytics. All right. So now let's get to the meat of the discussion, which is some organizing principles for data-driven organizations. So what you're looking at here is something I call the data org or data organization matrix, the DOM, D-O-M. And what this describes, or what this talks about, is that organizational design determines the distribution of data expertise and defines the method of data collaboration. So whether you recognize it in your company or not, this simple matrix plays out in your organization, or it should. And as I learned when I took business school courses back in the day, every good presentation has at least one 2x2. So this is one of my 2x2s. So let's step through each of these different blocks. So here you have on the vertical axis, this is how your knowledge is distributed. It can be generalized or it can be specialized, meaning there's a bunch of experts. On the horizontal axis, we have centralized and decentralized. So centralized means that all the data expertise is in one team or in one place. Decentralized means it's scattered across your organization. So let's think about what this means across the spectrum. So for knowledge distribution, the more concentrated the expertise, the higher the premium on organizational collaboration over knowledge sharing, okay? And then for organizational distribution, the more diffuse the data expertise, the more the organization relies on team-driven knowledge sharing and collaboration. Well, let's see what this means by breaking this out into this 2x2. So in the upper left corner, we have an organization that has generalized knowledge about data and is organized in a centralized way. So all of these generalists are in one place. So the imperative for that organization is that individuals will drive knowledge sharing. And why is that? Well, because everybody is a generalist. And since everybody is in one place and in one team, then it's up to the individuals to find the nuggets of knowledge that are needed for any particular task or project, right? You don't have to look across the organization. Everybody is within the team. Now, what about if you have a bunch of generalists in a decentralized organization? Well, now teams have to drive knowledge sharing because now knowledge is scattered across the organization in different teams. And when you want to collaborate and share, now teams have to take the initiative as an entity of themselves. It's not enough for an individual to do so, because if they approach a team, that team's goals, priorities are probably always going to override the individual request. Teams have to come together and work things out in terms of their priorities and the stakeholder value that they're trying to drive. Now let's flip the script and say now that we're an organization that has specialized knowledge, expertise, and is centralized in organization. So now in this case, individuals drive data collaboration. And you're probably asking, well, what's the difference between knowledge sharing and collaboration? Well, with knowledge sharing, we're just sharing information, but we're not necessarily working together to get a particular project done. In this case, in collaboration, there could be and there should be knowledge sharing going on, but even more importantly, we have to work together to get a specific task done. So when you have a bunch, when your knowledge distribution is specialized and you have centralized all those resources in one place, now it takes, I have an individual that knows A, I have an individual that's expert in B, I have an individual that's expert in C, but they're all in one place. And my goal is not necessarily to share knowledge, because if A shares knowledge with B, it may be, it may not serve the purpose in terms of B doesn't need A's knowledge in terms of their own development, but they do need A to get a particular job done. And that's where the collaboration comes. And then finally, if you have a bunch of specialists in a decentralized organization, now you got it. It has to be teams that drive the collaboration. Because again, as I mentioned before, in the decentralized place, it's hard for individuals to get teams to act on their behalf or in their interest. Teams have to come together and sort all of that out. So again, when you have a bunch of specialists, though, we're not necessarily sharing knowledge for sharing's sake, because we have our own specialties and areas of expertise. But what we need is to bring the experts together at any given time to get a particular job done, and that's collaboration. Okay, so I recognize that some of this could be a little nuanced. In your particular company, there may be some corner cases or special cases that make these distinctions even fuzzier. But let's move ahead and explore this a little more. And this is why it can become fuzzy, because there are actually overlapping ways in which we can define these roles in the inside supply chain. And that's what this sort of Venn diagram representation is meant to bring out. So let's take a look at the ways in which these roles overlap and what the impact of that is for the organization. So here you see my oval, my circle encompasses all the different roles, all three of them. And this is when we have generalization and roles are distributed across teams or an entire organization. So that means that, again, each of these roles are staffed by generalists. So what's the focus here for the organization is flexibility. When you have a lot of generalists, they can step into different moments in time with different types of skill sets. The context is usually reporting and monitoring of the data ecosystem or data architecture is more important than doing deep analysis. Now, there's some critical impacts to consider for this kind of organization as well. You'll have longer innovation cycles because you don't have experts. So it takes generalists a little longer to innovate because their knowledge is broad but not deep. There's a tendency toward larger teams to collect sufficient skills for important analytics initiatives. So, generalists will have overlapping areas of expertise, and that will tend to make the teams bigger when you want to get certain analytics initiatives done. And because of these overlapping areas of expertise for generalists, you have to be very vigilant to reduce the amount of redundancy in the work. And in terms of what people produce, you also have to be very vigilant when it comes to reducing redundancy in the definition of things like metrics. So because, again, everyone in the inside supply chain is a generalist, they each will have an interest or a tendency or a desire to create things that may already be created in other parts of the organization. All right. So again, that's generalization, and I put the oval around all three roles. Now, if you organize this way, where you put the centralized part around the data engineering and the analytics, now what you have is downstream specialization. And what this means is that you're providing data services to businesses. So now you've put expertise in the insights analytics part, and the data engineering and the analytics are more generalized. So what's the focus here for the organization? Well, the focus here is on the things that insights analytics does best, or analysts will do best: data visualization, knowledge, and insights curation. So they have their eyes on the ultimate value for the business of all of this data and analytics that we're doing, all this data work and analytics that we're doing. So what's the context? Well, we have business groups that have similar or overlapping data needs. There are business groups of varying degree of needs for analytic support. So the insights analysts are best positioned to deal with these business groups because of their overlapping needs, and their overlapping value propositions. The insights analysts have to really be business oriented, and that requires expertise on the business side. And that's what this downstream specialization creates. Now, what's the critical impact on the organization for this? Well, you have to put a premium on strong communication between data and business experts. So in this construction of the organization, the data engineers and the data analysts are considered the data team, and then the business experts are on the right, and they may end up talking different languages. So we have to make sure that the communication channels are strong and that we're constantly vigilant about developing those between the business experts and the data experts. All right, now the other way, as you can imagine, is upstream specialization. And this is where the specialization is in the data engineering side. So this is where data engineering provides services to the analyst community. And the focus here for an organization that organizes this way is that you want to have specialties in data, or have data specialists, again, on the engineering side. You want to be very efficient with your data architecture, and you want to drive innovation in your data architecture. The context for this is when your data environment is very complex, and the business may also be complex in this case as well. The critical impact to consider is that you're likely to have a centralized data center because you have the you have specialization on the data engineering side. You have to have a premium on strong cross-functional communication, because now a lot of the data speak is in the data engineering, and the business/data overlapping is on the downstream side. And then, of course, you have to have vigilance to align analytics and the data center. And what this just means is that, the data engineers are overlooking the data modeling, but now the communication has to be strong between the business and the data center to make sure that those data models are aligned to the problems that the analysts are trying to solve. Whereas in the other downstream specialization, the data analytics folks were very closely tied with data engineering. And so they are often working together to create data models that are aligned to solving business problems, or at least supporting the insights analysts. All right, and now the final one, this is my least favorite, and maybe I should have put this one first, is the siloed organization, where now we're going to focus on making each one of these roles its own specialty in the organization. Or its own special vertical. So in this case, the focus is on functional expertise. So the data engineers are one function, the data analysts are one function, and the insights analysts are another function. And they're all in their own verticals, and they are focused on being the best functional vertical they can be. They're focused on execution relative to what their functional expertise requires, or their vertical requires. And they're focused, of course, on innovation, because their priorities are aligned with their vertical. And the other benefit sometimes for individuals here is that because they're in these very clear verticals, all three roles or all three functions provide clear vertical career paths for people to develop themselves in the organization. So the context here for an organization is that it's large or complex, but it needs centralized, easy to identify resources assigned to large projects and programs. So just for an example, just take like a huge 10,000 person company, and across the company, large projects and programs are executed from time to time, or maybe all the time. And with these verticals and these functions, with these functions assigned to these verticals, it's very easy to find the components that you need to execute on these large projects and programs. So you need a data engineer? Okay, let's go to the data engineering team. You need an insights analyst? Okay, I know where the insights analyst team is. And of course, those verticals are created such that they know to expect that their role is to jump into these large cross-company, cross-functional projects and programs when needed. Now, what are the critical impacts of organizing this way? Well, communication cycles can take longer because now you have these verticals where everybody is speaking different languages. And most importantly, you're going to need data savvy leadership to coordinate the collaboration across these different silos and different verticals. So whereas I was talking about before, teams and individuals will drive collaboration or knowledge sharing, when you have these distinct silos and verticals, you really need to have leadership at the C level, maybe even, or at least the VP level, that is very adept, very good at organizing these different resources and are generalists enough such that they know enough about these different verticals to know what it takes to coordinate across them. All right, so those are the three different ways of organizing. And I put them into another 2x2 to really hone in on the distinct features of these different ways of organizing. So let's take a look. So again, remember on the vertical, we have how expertise is distributed, generalized or specialized. And on the horizontal, we have how the organization is organized, whether it's centralized or decentralized. So when you have generalized expertise or generalized knowledge in a centralized organization, then you will distribute your roles across teams. All right, because the way that this works is all the data folks are in one big one big group, and you will distribute, because everyone's a generalist, you'll distribute the teams as needed according to whatever strategic objectives the company has. Now, when you have a generalized distribution of knowledge with a decentralized organization, now these roles get distributed across the entire organization. When knowledge management or when knowledge is specialized in a centralized organization, you will then provide data services to businesses. So hopefully you remember that downstream specialization. The upstream specialization. And then finally, when we have specialized knowledge and decentralized organization, you're now providing data engineering services to analysts, whether they're data analysts and insights analysts working together. So this is a way of breaking down all of those Venn diagrams into another 2x2. And let me just review again one more time really quickly. So when it's generalized, we're distributing roles across teams or organizations, depending upon how the company is structured. And then when knowledge is specialized, now we go into either downstream or upstream specialization, depending upon whether we are centralized or decentralized in the organization. All right, so that's the summary on data organization principles for the inside supply chain. So now let's bring this all together and talk about this in a strategic framework. In other words, the organizational design for the inside supply chain is a strategic choice. And the reason why I like to talk about this strategic choice is because I've been in companies where the eternal debate goes back and forth between centralizing data and decentralizing data, and then back to centralizing. And then oftentimes it depends upon just the preferences of the leadership. But with this framework, you can be much more purposeful about how to think through what's the best way to organize, whether centralized or decentralized, depending upon the strategic objectives of the organization. So what I have seen is that this decision between centralization and decentralization depends upon the degree of independence of the business units. And that degree of independence, of course, depends upon the marketplace that your company is working in and how best the company sees to deliver products and services into that market. So let's look at the centralized data org. This is a company where data expertise is recognized as a strategic lever. Maybe the company is selling data products and data services into the marketplace. And in this case, then the data org itself can become centralized. So this data org is focusing on building data infrastructure with advanced tools and methods, will innovate on data performance, and career paths are focused on data expertise. Now, if you remember from the talk that I made about the descriptions I made, you see some elements of each of the different organizational choices in this centralized data org. So again, this is not locking your decision into one specific structure. It's actually showing you what the different options are, even when you decide to become centralized or decentralized. So now, if you, on the right-hand side, you're decentralized, this is where, again, look at your marketplace, look at the company as a whole, and this is a place where the different business units in a company are responsible for delivering products and services into the market. So these business units themselves have their own specialty in delivering those products and services to very specific marketplaces. And they can do that most effectively when they each have their own data orgs alongside with them. And so now the data orgs from the company perspective are decentralized. And now we have distributed data expertise as integrated support for these business units. So you integrate data functions with project, product, or operational management. You'll innovate on the functional use of data. So your innovation is now focused on how data best supports those business products and services. And career paths are now focused on functional needs, not necessarily on data careers. And so again, just to make this point, on the left-hand side with the centralized data org, the data itself, the data team itself is a strategic lever for the marketplace that the company as a whole is working in. On the right-hand side with the decentralized setup or organization, data is not the strategic lever. Some other product or service is the strategic lever, and data is supporting that effort. So again, the amount of centralization is a strategic choice driven by business models. And when I say business models, I'm talking about the kinds of products and services that the company is delivering. All right. One more 2x2. So now the key question to ask for the data org matrix or the DOM is data a core competence? And here's a 2x2 to get us thinking about how to answer that question. And you'll notice again the familiar left-hand side or the vertical axis, generalized versus specialized knowledge. And at the bottom is centralized versus decentralized organization. So when knowledge is generalized, that means data is a support function for slowly changing business needs for data. When it's centralized organization, that means we're maximizing data availability. So all the generalists are in one place, and we're trying to maximize the availability of those resources at any time for any kind of need. When we decentralize generalists, that means we want maximum staffing availability for rapid assignment across business units. So again, remember the graphic from the previous slide. We are in service, data is now in service of different business units, and those individual business units need to have quick access to data resources. Now, when knowledge and expertise is specialized, this is when data is a core competence. So if data is going to be a strategic lever of the company, that means data is a core competence. And if data is a core competence, you're going to have to specialize in the different ways or the different roles and functions that a data ecosystem can take on. So if the business is centralized, meaning there's interdependent business units, the company is focused on unifying metrics and methods to maximize data's operational excellence across the company. So we're specialized, all the specialists are in one place, and everyone can very quickly agree upon unified data models, on definitions of metrics, definition of data methods, and so on. And the focus is on the operational excellence of the data team to execute for any given business need. Now, when you have your specialists decentralized, again, remember now we have different business units delivering particular products and services into the marketplace. An example where this is useful is when you're monetizing data for customers in specialized non-overlapping verticals. Okay, so each, again, business unit has a set of experts, and that data expertise is specific to the needs of that business unit. And that business unit may be trying to monetize based on what those experts can do with the data. And presumably the verticals that these business units are operating in don't overlap. And what this does is it enables rapid execution by the businesses, the different business units. And that, they don't have to rely necessarily on different business units because they have the specialties in-house that are aligned to their specific marketplace and products and services. All right. So again, the key question for the data org matrix or the DOM here is to answer, is data a core competence? If the answer is no, then you should be more inclined to go the generalized route. If the answer is yes, then you should be going the specialized route. And then the centralized versus decentralized should be answered by the marketplace and how you deliver your products and services into that marketplace. All right, so let's sum this all up. The DOM uses knowledge management to create value from the inside supply chain. Data is a tool for managing knowledge in service of value creation. So we don't do data, we don't do knowledge management for its own sake. It's always in service of value creation, and value creation is determined by the business and, again, the products and services that they're delivering to a particular marketplace. We specialize knowledge management to create value from a strategic core competence in data. So again, there was that matrix where you're answering whether you want to have core competence in data, and if so, then you want to specialize your knowledge management to create that value. We centralize knowledge management to maximize data leverage and create consistent value from standards of data excellence. So again, as I was saying, if you're really focused on excellence in execution for a data team, then centralizing the knowledge, the way we manage our knowledge is the best way to go about it. And the inside supply chain will work best when those resources are all centralized in one place. And now we tune the amount of specialization and centralization according to the degree of dependence across the business units, with knowledge management as a binding organizational imperative. So on one extreme, if the business units are completely non-overlapping, completely independent, decentralize. If there is some overlap, if business units sometimes have to lean on the knowledge and data expertise in other business units, then in that case, you should tend to have more centralized data resources. All right. So this is the point where I typically will go into Q&A. There is no Q&A for this portion of my presentation, so I will just conclude by thanking all of you for watching this presentation. Feel free to put any of your questions in the comment section on the video, and I will answer them as soon as I can. You can also check me out at Ahan Analytics. That's AHAN-analytics.drduru, DRDURU.com. So that's ahan-analytics.drduru.com. And you can check out more of the services that I offer to small teams, small organizations in getting their inside supply chain working as well as possible, and to provide strategic consulting and advising on how best to align the data ecosystem, the data people, and the business objectives and value creation. So again, thank you for attending, and I will hopefully see you soon. Happy analytics.